welfare. Chris, welcome to Talk TV Drive. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Jeremy. Nice to be on.
I guess the problem is when you do a job like this. I thought it was such an incredible concept. I'm sure there were loopholes and all of that, and I thought that was great. But I remember talking, actually, strange enough, to Matt Hancock about it at the time, and saying, these checks are really, really, really important. The security checks are massively important because, yes, we're trying to alleviate human trafficking and we're trying to show that we're doing our bit, because one can only look at the horror that unfolds in Ukraine and want to help. Is there a feeling now, because of this report, that it was rushed through a bit, not thought through enough? It was more about headlines than practicality? What's your take on that, pal?
I think it's an emergency situation. The checks that the UK are doing is actually far and above what's happening in places like Romania, Poland, Germany. People are just entering into people's houses, no checks, no visas. So the fact that there are some checks here is kind of better. I'd also like to say that overall, most of the placements have been very successful. Our little town had a May Fair on Monday, and we set up a little booth just to welcome Ukrainians. We all had our little sunflower badges on and flags, and the vast majority of those placements are fantastic. Families getting the support they need. Sadly, because it's a lot of people that are coming, there are these outlier cases where abuse and inappropriate behaviour is taking place. So I've been saying to the government for a while, there needs to be a national helpline. So as soon as you know there's a problem, you've got someone to phone. I also think we need more training and vetting for those that come forward. Overall, the scheme has been incredibly successful.
Isn't that the problem, though? And I'm looking at both sides for a reason, because I think it said everything that's great about this country. There was a need. The rhetoric was very much about speed. This is a humanitarian disaster. We need to get it done. There's a naivety, is there not, to think that complete strangers, vulnerable and traumatized from thousands of miles away, are going to arrive in people's houses, and there isn't going to be much disconnect, because of course there is going to be, and that takes time to work at. Should people be trained to welcome refugees? I don't want to knock it, but it's pretty obvious to me, to be fair. But it's a timing issue, isn't it?
It is, and at one level, the government was damned if it did and damned if it doesn't. Yeah. If it offered these visas and a process of application, they were told off for being too slow. And if they open up the borders and let people through, they're told that there haven't been enough safety checks in place. So it is what it is. I think it's an evacuation situation, really. Imagine that your house was on fire, Jeremy, and someone came in to help rescue your family. You wouldn't say, "Hold on, have you been DBS checked before I let you in through the door?" You'll just say, "Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Got me out." So I do think we need more training. In fact, Sanctuary Foundation is launching in the next couple of days a training course on things like safeguarding, how to work people with trauma, how you overcome some of those cultural differences. Because I'm a foster parent, and before foster parents are allowed anywhere near vulnerable children, we go through all sorts of vetting and all sorts of training. I think we need to show that same level of diligence and duty of care towards these vulnerable people that are coming from Ukraine.
Absolutely, we do. We've made the point about timing, and you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But of course, the issue here predominantly was that it was mainly women and children who were arriving from these stricken stories, and they would be at their most vulnerable. And I know the headlines will say, men taking advantage. God would only hope that it's just a small number. But it comes back to, as you said, wanting to put it on, right? I mean, really wanting to get on with it, not just to show that we're doing something, but to deal with a crisis that was engulfing the world. And then being criticised. I mean, I remember hearing so many stories from the border that, our red tape was holding up. I watched Rob Rinder do a report where he said we're the only country that's slow. We're the country that's going through meticulous red tape, and it's wrong and it's boring and well, not boring. It's not doing what needs to be done. So you've got that humanitarian disaster wanting to help. And then you do it and people are saying there's going to be a few issues. I don't know whether you never want to say that would be expected, but in the real world, you would sort of understand. So a training course, do you believe the scheme should continue? Do you believe it's just, cranking it up? Do you believe there should be more checks? What do you say to that?
I definitely think this scheme needs to continue. I'm hoping that we could change some of the mindset around this. Instead of just thinking about one family moving to one household, we should think about moving whole communities into communities. I think about it like this: if you were going to transplant a tree, you wouldn't do it one leaf at a time. You'd try to take the whole tree and the root ball together, and I think that will overcome some of the vulnerability issues.
And just to prove that
think
I am
that's
environmentally sound, you'd plant lots of trees together, wouldn't you? To be fair, that's one of the things. But it's the logistical nightmare, Chris, is obvious to anybody, and I just, it's a bit like the Rwandan thing. I don't want to get into that with you, but I get a bit peeved with people who spend months and years moaning about something. I'm not sticking up for the government here, I'm just saying life. And then we do something and 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people say, oh, that's gone wrong. Well, is it not better to try, discover mistakes, deal with them, than not try at all?
I totally agree with you, Jeremy. Look, the vast majority of these placements have been successful. That doesn't mean we need to be sloppy. We need to make sure we're checking and giving people an alarm system so they can let us know if something's going wrong.
Yeah.
But overall, it's been amazing. Think back to the kinder transport, 1939. Kids were just left at train stations and random strangers picked them up. We're far better than that. But even under those circumstances, overall, that was a successful migration. Think about all those incredible politicians and business leaders that came from that story. I think in years to come, we will look back on this moment of hospitality towards Ukrainians and we'll say this was the game changer in our generation.
Dr. Krish Kandiah, I'm going to tell you something, right? And this is genuinely true. I've said this for years and years. People like you deserve the utmost respect. I'm not talking about the Sanctuary Foundation. People who foster kids deserve, in my opinion, the greatest respect from the rest of this country and the world. Fair play to you, sir, and thank you for being on. Dr. Krish Kandiah, Sanctuary Foundation, dealing and promoting with refugees from Ukraine and their good welfare, which is important. It's 18 minutes to 6. What do you want to talk about, my friends? It's your show. It's 0344 499 1000.